In this episode, we're going to be doing issues 6 and 7, so let's clear the board. So we're going to be dealing with who is the father of Zerubbabel. So this is this issue. Matthew tells us it is Shealtiel. I can't pronounce his name, so you're going to have to bear with me. Or is it Pedaiah? Parts in the Old Testament differ as to who is Zerubbabel's father. And the second issue we'll be dealing with is who is Abiud to Jacob. So basically these names from Abiud all the way down to Jacob are unknown to the Old Testament. So can we make any sense out of these names? But let's begin with our first issue with who is the father of Zerubbabel. So if we refer to 1 Chronicles in the Masoretic text, we are told that Jeconiah had two sons, Pedaiah and Shealtiel, and Pedaiah had their son Zerubbabel. If we compare this to other places in the Old Testament, for instance Ezra, Nehemiah and Haggai, we're told that it isn't Pedaiah who's the father of Zerubbabel, but rather it is Shealtiel who's the father of Zerubbabel. So what are we to do with this, what seems to be a contradiction? Well, the Septuagint obviously saw this tension between 1 Chronicles and Ezra, and hence in the 1 Chronicles version, the Septuagint version of 1 Chronicles, they've actually swapped the name over, in which case Shealtiel is the father of Zerubbabel. Now it must be said that it is possible that 1 Chronicles in the Septuagint preserves the original reading, and the Masoretic is perhaps a later scribal error, but we're going to leave that issue. All we need to know is that the Septuagint version agrees with Ezra, Nehemiah, and Haggai. When Matthew comes along, it's clear that Matthew departs from the Masoretic reading and adopts either the Septuagint reading or the Ezra, Nehemiah, Haggai reading, because Matthew tells us that Shealtiel is the father of Zerubbabel. And this point is made by many scholars. For instance, Richard Bauckham notes, according to 1 Chronicles 3:19 Masoretic, Zerubbabel was the son not of Shealtiel, but of his brother Pedaiah. So let's just read that again. Zerubbabel was not the son of Shealtiel, but rather of his brother Pedaiah. This discrepancy from the usual Old Testament description of Zerubbabel as son of Shealtiel is corrected in 1 Chronicles 3:19 of the Septuagint. So he's telling us that the Septuagint corrected this tension between 1 Chronicles and Ezra, and Matthew is following the Septuagint version. And just one more quote from this. In Blair French's book Chronicles, he writes, "It's generally agreed that the Greek version of Chronicles was a primary source for the names of Jesus' forebears up until the return of the Judahites from exile. Matthew also follows the Septuagint Chronicles identification of Zerubbabel's father. In Masoretic Chronicles, Zerubbabel is listed as the son of Pedaiah, but in the Septuagint Chronicles, Zerubbabel is listed as the son of Shealtiel, Greek for Shealtiel, Pedaiah's brother." So here he just notes that it's based on this, it's very likely that Matthew was following the Septuagint. So this is actually another instance. We've noted previously that Matthew is following the Septuagint version rather than a Masoretic-like text. Obviously the Masoretic text didn't exist at that time. French continues, once Matthew reached Zerubbabel, however, he set aside Chronicles' record and supplied names that have no other scriptural attestation. We'll be dealing with the second paragraph later. But let's now just come here and we can say, is this a contradiction concerning who is the father of Zerubbabel? And I'm going to give another cop-out answer. It's a question mark, because this contradiction lies in the Old Testament. It's resolved by the Septuagint. But now we have to ask the question, should Matthew be held accountable to problems in the Old Testament? We've faced issues like this before, but I'm just going to put a question mark there, because there is tension in the Masoretic text as to who Zerubbabel's father truly is. With that being said, now let's move on to the seventh issue, which is who are Abiud to Jacob? Who are these names? And this point is made by Warren Carter in his book, who writes, 11 names, Zerubbabel, Abiud, Eliakim, Azor, Zadok, Achum, Eliud, Eleazar, Mathan, Jacob, Joseph, cover nearly 600 years between Zerubbabel and Joseph. Most of these names do not appear in the genealogies of 1 Chronicles. For example, Abiud is not one of the 5 sons of Zerubbabel mentioned in 1 Chronicles 3:19-20. Several characters in the biblical traditions bear the name Eliakim, Azor, Zadok, including David's priests, 2 Samuel 15:24-29, and Eleazar. So here he's telling us that Matthew departs from the Old Testament, even to the extent of not including a true son of Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel's children are mentioned in 1 Chronicles, but Matthew does not tell us that. He gives us Abiud, who is not mentioned as one of his sons. So Matthew here is departing from the Old Testament. And we really have no idea who these people are, and it's very hard to string together a theory as to why he's included these names. As Carter here notes, several of the names are reminiscent of Old Testament characters. For instance, Eliakim and Zadok and Eleazar are all very familiar names. He tells us that Azor is. For the life of me, I cannot find any Azor in the Old Testament. I don't know why Carter includes him as one who is contained in the biblical tradition. If you know where Azor is in the Old Testament, please leave a comment below. I cannot find him. Anyway, I was going to give you some theories as to why these names are included, but I'm no longer going to do that because they are just pure and utter speculation. And I think Hagner has it right. Hagner, in his commentary, when he comes to these names, he simply says, the names from Abiud, not listed among the sons of Zerubbabel in 1 Chronicles 3:19-20, to Jacob, the father of Joseph, are not known to us from any other source. And he just leaves it there and does not comment upon these names. And I think Hagner has the right idea because it is nothing but speculation. And I really don't want to be engaging in silly speculation. That being said, let me give you a little bit of a rundown. So here are the names that Matthew includes. And Gundry, I love Gundry, but sometimes he goes a bit off the rails, and he tries to string together a theory in which all of these names have some kind of cryptic meaning, and he dives into their etymologies and tries to get something out of them, but there's nothing really concrete that he says. And I really just want to comment upon two names that I think we can say something concrete about. We know who Eliakim is. We know who Zadok is. There was an earlier Zadok who ministered as a high priest during David's reign. So that Zadok here in Jesus' genealogy points yet again to the Davidic royalty. So I think Gundry is correct. Gundry goes through all these names and tries to connect them all to some kind of regal, royal, kingly connection. And I think Zadok, being a priest to David, ties into that theory. The other name that Gundry points out is Eliakim. Eliakim likewise points to Jesus' Davidic messiahship, in that according to Isaiah 22:20-24, a passage that Matthew will echo in 16:19, this name belongs to a man who will receive the key to the house of David. So first he notes that Zadok is connected to David as he was a priest to David, and Eliakim is connected to David because it's connected to the kingly line because of a reference to Eliakim in Isaiah 22, which Matthew alludes to in Matthew 16. I'm going to delve into this issue soon, but I just want to note that these are the only two names that we can really get any information out of. Other people are going to do just utter speculation, and it's just a waste of time. But let's just now dive into this Isaiah 22 quote and the connection to Eliakim. So in Isaiah 22, we read the following. On that day, I will call my servant Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, and he will clothe him with your robe and bind your sash on him. I will commit your authority to his hand, and he shall be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and to the house of Judah. I will place on his shoulder the key of the house of David. He shall open, and no one shall shut. He shall shut, and no one shall open. I will fasten him like a peg in a secure place, and he will become a throne of honor to his ancestral house. So here he is. And remember, the Gundry said that this description of Eliakim to some kind of regal office is very similar to the one that Matthew provides in chapter 16 of Peter. So, of course, in Matthew 16, you should all be familiar with this text. Jesus says, and I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I'll give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Then he sternly ordered the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. So this language of giving someone a key is found in Isaiah 22 and Matthew 16. The idea of loosening and people being unable to loosen what this person does is found in Isaiah 22. There may be some sort of an illusion that Matthew is trying to establish, and therefore perhaps one of the reasons why Matthew lists Eliakim, a part of his genealogy, is just to kind of give a teaser for what happens in Matthew 16. But apart from that, we have no idea why Matthew includes these names. And you shouldn't waste your time trying to figure out why. Believe me, I did. Okay, so let us go here. Who are Abiud to Jacob? Feel very good putting a question mark here. We have no idea. We have no idea who these people are. We have no idea why Matthew has included them. Trying to string together a theory is just too hard. And with that, I'm going to leave that there. So we're up to our last one in the next video, and then we're finished. And then we will begin talking about the Gospel of Luke's genealogy. So hopefully you've enjoyed this one. This was a short one, and I'll see you next time.